this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our guests for being here. Now, Minister, I'm going to rewind back to October 3rd because we had a correction on the record from that visit. And I had asked you about sexual offenses against children and whether you were prepared to end house arrest. And I have the transcript here, and you were advised by an official that house arrest for people who commit sex offenses against children was not a legal sentence. Do you recall that?
I recall the question you asked me, yes.
Yes, I asked you 2 or 3 times in various different forms. Now, you're aware that the record has been clarified and that most jurisdictions, and I believe one newspaper story I have here references Bill C-5, that sex offenses against children can lead to a conditional sentence order, in other words, house arrest. Do you agree with that?
I believe the interaction that we had, specifically once the formal committee session had stopped, was that you were making an inquiry as to whether that provision that you identified in the code had been struck down by one of the courts.
Yes, and I believe that your official came on the record, I wasn't here, but on the record stated that house arrest was available, that various courts had struck it down. My recollection is that, probably 90% of the population has that available. Are we good on that? Do you understand where I'm going with this?
I understand where you're going, yes.
Okay, so given that sexual offenses against children can result in house arrest, are you prepared to plug that legislative gap?
What I'd say to you is similar to what I said at the time of that hearing, and I appreciate that was on a different bill, so I don't have all of my notes before me, but with respect to S12, what we're trying to do is take a strong step in the direction of maintaining a sex offender registry to keep people safe from sexual predators.
But I'm not talking about keeping people safe from the S12 point of view. I am talking about keeping people safe generally. This is a very clear question, with all due respect, Minister.
Yeah.
Are you prepared to eliminate house arrest for people who commit sexual offenses against children or have images of doing it in the form of child sexual abuse and exploitation material? Yes or no, will you plug that hole?
So, Mr. Caputo, what I'd say to you is that the conditional sentencing orders are available in certain prescribed circumstances, and we've got case law, including from the Ontario courts, that talks about when such a sentence would be appropriate or inappropriate. In the case of violent sexual offenses, the Ontario Court of Appeal has been pretty clear that they are not available and should not be available in such context.
Well, with all due respect, Minister, I've got a number of newspaper articles here where there have been conditional sentence orders, and in fairness, some of them have been on joint submissions, and I won't get into the nuances of that, but here we go. I can go through them if you like. I don't intend to spend my time dealing with this, but, well, here's one. I'm just going to see, where is the date here?
Mr. Chair, I have a copy of the meeting agenda or the meeting notice if any of the members from the Conservative Party would like to see it, because so far none of them seem interested the least bit about the issue at hand, which is miscarriage of justice, because their questions are completely unrelated. But I'm not going to ask you for a ruling because I know that that's not something you're wanting to do today.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. Go ahead, Mr. Caputo.
I believe I have 3 minutes and 58 seconds left. If we want to get back to this was something that came up at the last committee, and I was stymied on asking this very question because of the advice that you received. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but we could not flesh this out because of that. So with all due respect, I think I should have time with the minister. This is an important issue, and some people would argue that miscarriage of justice occurs when a victim who's subject to a psychological life sentence sees their abuser have house arrest. In any event, I have an article right here. House arrest for 78-year-old Niagara Falls man convicted of child pornography offenses. Don't like using that. Should be child sexual abuse and exploitation material. But that's the headline. So the Ontario Court of Appeal has said this, and I don't know which decision that is, but I'll take your word for it. But, Minister, it is available. Regardless, sometimes there are exceptional circumstances, I get that, but it can happen. People are in a psychological life sentence, serving a psychological life sentence, who are victims of sexual crimes. Will you legislate so that people who commit sexual offenses against children or who have depictions of such cannot receive house arrest? Yes or no?
So what I'd say to you is a few things, Mr. Caputo. So is the issue of sexual offenses important? Yes, absolutely it is. Is it critically important in terms of protecting children from sexual predators? Absolutely. 100% agreement on that. What I would say to you is that when, in this context we're dealing with wrongful convictions, what you're talking about is a sentencing disposition in the context of using a CSO, or conditional sentence order, for a particular case What I would say to you is that the criminal justice system is structured, you would know this actually better than I do as a former Crown, is such that one has the ability to appeal from a conviction, but also to appeal the terms of a sentence. So
But we're not talking about an appeal,
If I could
Mr.
just finish, but
With
there
all
is
due
a
respect,
there's
we
a
have
mechanism
limited
in
time.
place to address the infirmity or lack of appropriateness of a sentence. And lastly, what I would say is that if it's coming in on a joint submission, I think you have to look at why a Crown and a defense attorney would take the position that it may be appropriate in a given context.
But Minister, some of these aren't coming in on joint submissions, and you're talking about the inappropriateness or appropriateness. The fact is that the buck stops with Parliament, whether something is appropriate or inappropriate, based on the maximum sentence, based on the minimum sentence, and based on whether Parliament says that a conditional sentence order in the form of house arrest is appropriate. So with all due respect, you and I part company at that point. And I'm going to ask again, based on the seriousness, and you have acknowledged it, based on the seriousness, why are we not putting forward a bill right here, right now, that says sex offenses against children will not result in house arrest, given the foregoing?
Mr. Caputo, we have a bill that's before us right now. That's not the bill you're choosing to speak about. That's the first point. Secondly, we will definitely part company if you think people in your former profession, Crown attorneys, should have their discretion fettered such that they're not permitted to put in a joint
fetter
submission.
discretion every
Thank you,
time
Mr.
we-
Caputo.